Okay, here we go. Nice and quiet.
Sound speeds, camera rolling.
Holding for sound.
Last looks. Calling for last looks.
And set, and action.
I need to swap batteries.
You know, making movies is hard.
Making movies is hard.
Welcome to Making Movies is Hard, the podcast about the struggle of being an independent filmmaker. I'm Mark Russell.
I'm Liz Manischel.
This week we have director-editor Jay Cheel on the show to talk about his documentary series, Cursed Films, on Shudder, which came out on digital, DVD, and Blu-ray on August 18th, and Season 2 is going to be hitting Shudder in the near future. So it was really great talking to Jay.
I just always look for those notes that are revealing cracks in my own ideas or perspectives and force me to confront those ideas and articulate why I think it works for the episode or doesn't. So being challenged by really good notes, I think is a great thing, especially when it ends up turning into a better idea than you had.
He told us all about how he landed the job directing Cursed Films, the process on making the series, and the difference between when he works on his own thing versus, you know, when he's working for hire. But Liz, do you have something for us?
I mean, I might, but I think both of us have mail.
My breath catches in my chest until I hear three little words. You got mail.
All right, this week we have a brand new, spanking new iTunes review. How many times can I say new in what sentence? Brittany Guerin wrote that this is the best film podcast out, and she gave us 5 stars. Brittany is very kind. So Brittany wrote, I'm a screenwriter and filmmaker, and let me just say I have searched far and wide for a good, entertaining, and consistent film podcast. MMIH is everything I wanted and needed in film podcast. I love the new additions. It's also inspiring that Liz is a mother, because so am I. Oh. Also, subscribe to their YouTube page. Yes, they are up on YouTube now. I'm so excited for more content. Might even support the Patreon when I get my coins up. This is a person we did not pay to write this, and it's as if we did, because she's promoted everything we wanted her to promote and said the nicest things. So thank you very much, Brittany.
And at Think Sadie, do you know what that is?
I figured that was like her cool username, but
okay.
I think this Brittany friended me on Instagram and sent me a little message, and I think that was her username.
Okay, there you go. Awesome.
It was very cool. But
well, thank you, Brittany.
Yeah, thanks, Brittany. If you want to be like Brittany and follow her exact directions, you can support us at Patreon, www.patreon.com/MMIH podcast. Give us $1, $5, whatever you'd like, whatever, any support matters. You can also send us a question, comment, or suggestion to podcast@makingmoviesishard.com. If you like the show, it really is meaningful for you to leave a review and let us know how we're doing, what you like, what you don't like. You can leave a review on iTunes or any of the places you listen to podcasts on. And lastly, if you head over to our Instagram page, you click the link in our bio, you can head to our brand new YouTube page. And we have reached 100 subscribers, so we are officially off and running, and we would love to share some video content with you.
We have another very exciting thing. We've got another short film to talk about.
Get shorty. Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom.
So you make movies, huh?
I produce feature motion pictures.
I got an idea for a movie.
So this week we have a film by listener Charnstar Anderson called Lace. Let's just hear what Charnstar has to say.
The reason I decided to make this as a short rather than any other medium is mainly because this was kind of my first foray into straight drama. I work primarily in comedy. I did stand-up comedy for years. I'm far more comfortable in comedy or in genre, and doing such a personal drama is very daunting for me. Very difficult for me to do, and so I decided, I'll just, dip my toe into it. I wouldn't, go crazy with it. And at the same time, I also think that the message I'm trying to get across works better in a short format, because I don't want to spend an hour and a half just saying, hey guys, I'm normal too. I kind of just want to get in and out with that message and let people know that, we're real. Why this story? I think it's probably very obvious that this story is very personal to me. I kind of based the whole ending on a interaction I had when I was 18. It was kind of one of my first moments of clarity, which was I was working at a toy store, and one of my workmates, I noticed that she was wearing pink lacy underwear while we're working at a toy store, and just out of curiosity, I asked her about it, and initially, she was very embarrassed, obviously, and slowly she started opening up, and she started telling me how it wasn't about people seeing it, it was about how it made her feel. And I don't think at the time she realized how formative that moment was for me, because I was kind of like, I understand all too well. That kind of like changed my whole perspective on what was going on with me. And of course, it's something that a lot of people don't know about. I think even though we have comedians like Eddie Izzard or Andrew O'Neill out there who are putting themselves out there and letting them know that this is a normal thing, so many times, we get confused with drag queens or, transgender. And I don't want people to confuse me for transgender, because trans people are real, trans people are valid, trans men are men and trans women are women, and I'm just some dickhead who looks great in heels. So I kind of want to get rid of that stigmatization of the word transvestite, because it's a very important word for me. It's kind of a word that, until I knew it was a thing, I was lost. I didn't know what was happening with me. And the moment, I stumbled upon people like Eddie Izzard, it was like, oh, I feel validated. I feel like I found my people. So yeah, I'm hoping, I want to do that for people as well. When it comes to the funds, there were kind of no funds for this film. Everything was kind of done pro bono. I had just gotten out of film school, so I had no money because I spent it all on my grad film. With my grad film, I had 2 different crowdfunding campaigns, and we raised way too much money, and it was all insane, so I didn't want to do any of that now I'm out. I wanted to get as much free stuff as I could. So I was working at the film school. I was able to source all the equipment from there. I was able to source crew from the students there, because now they look up to me because I'm staff. I was an actor before I was a filmmaker, so I was able to source some of my friends from acting school and some people I had worked with prior, and all of these things started coming together, and it was something that I was able to do by myself. Which is why I did so many of the roles I produced, directed, edited. I was trying to just go, you know what, I can do that, that's free. Anything I can do, that's free. Brilliant. Move it on. The one thing where the budget kind of came in was the underwear. The underwear was the underwear and catering. Don't want to confuse the two. That was where all the money went. I didn't want the actors to have to bring in their own underwear, so I bought them underwear. They got to take theirs home. Lydia was far happier about that than John, but, I'm sure John loves it now. We'll see. He spent a whole film wearing it. He loves it. Before making the short, I kind of made a rule for myself that now I was out of film school, I would be making at least 1 short film per year, just so I've always got that creative juices flowing. I'm never going stagnant. So it was kind of getting to the end of the year when this film came along, so I was like, alright, the one thing I want out of it is the fact that I'll have a film this year, and maybe it'll get into festivals. The thing that actually kind of worked out really well in my favor that I genuinely wasn't expecting is that by writing a genre that I was so not used to, it made me work far more creatively. It's improved even my comedy scripts. I've written several scripts since then, and working in interpersonal drama the way I did with Lace kind of really works in those films as well. So sure, I haven't blown up, and I don't think anyone takes me as a serious director yet, but on a personal level, I'm definitely improving, and I can see that, and other people can see that too. Now that it's out in the world, I hope that it serves just to let people know that, not only let other people know that transvestites are real, but hopefully it'll give someone the clarity that I needed when I was younger. I went through so much gender confusion because I didn't understand that, maybe you can just wear it and it's nice. It doesn't necessarily have to be a gender-based thing. It's just that I look really hot in heels and a dress. So be it. Who am I to complain? When it comes to the inspiration of the tone of the film, it's kind of interesting because it changed a lot through from when I wrote it to when we were actually shooting it. There were actually a lot more jokes in the script, which some that I cut the script, some I cut on set. Like, I noticed the way everything was going. I'm like, oh, these don't actually work. And then some I didn't even cut until the edit. But one of the things that really changed the visual tone of it was the episode San Junipero from Black Mirror. I knew that I wanted the film to feel very sexy. There's no better word for it. I wanted the film to feel sexy. And it wasn't until we saw San Junipero that we saw this romance and earnestness that I think we really needed. And that kind of changed the whole way it came about. And I lay all the acclaim on my DP's feet. Gabby Cicino, she blew me out of the park with what she was able to do with the lights to really set what we were going for. And once that kind of like clicked in place, everything kind of came together. Yeah, that's everything.
So, Ulrich, you picked this one. I'm putting you on the spot. Why? Why this one?
Well, I instantly like the style of it. It has a very distinct point of view. It also kind of took me off guard because it's very intense. It's like very over the top with the music and the sound design, which is something that I actually like a lot, in movies. Like, if you watch my movies, like, you'll see similar things. But yeah, so I like the style. I like that it was very... And it never let up. Like, it was like pretty much like, no, this is what this movie is. This is our tone. We're going for it. I also like that it felt very personal. And then later I learned that Charnstar identifies as a transvestite. So it is personal, obviously. And then I really like the performances too. I thought they did a really great job, and it felt honest and like real. So those were the things that really spoke to me. What did you think, Liz?
Yeah, I mean, I love personal pieces in general. This one, I didn't know the backstory before watching it, so I kind of just judged it as a self-encompassed piece of art. And though it was a little intense for me, and I thought delved into a little bit of expositional dialogue, I do appreciate a film that has to do with sexuality on the margins that has a happy ending. So I have to say, like, I really enjoyed that it took us a place that we've been millions of times before, like someone feeling vulnerable and scared about exposing something about themselves, sexual identity, and then it didn't punish that character. It really gave him exactly what he wanted, which I have to say did make me very happy. I just, again, want to say, like, making a movie is really hard. What Charnstar did was really difficult and very cool, and I commend Charnstar.
But thank you, Charnstar, for sharing your work with us, and I hope people dig it, and I'm kind of curious to hear what people think. So if you have thoughts on the film, please email us or, talk about it online. We'd love to hear more of, get more interaction around this segment, because we really enjoy doing this. But I don't know, like, we kind of want more engagement from the audience on these short films. So I don't know, maybe we need to do a better job of posting them or something.
Yeah, and as always, if you want us to feature your short film, send us that email to podcast@makingmoviesishard.com. And we bring it up all the time, but poor Ulrich is creating a database of every short film we've been sent, and we go to that database every time we record a show. So we're watching your stuff, and we'd like to support you.
And we're getting some stuff that's like shot on iPhones. Definitely looks like first-time filmmakers, or at least early in their career filmmakers. And, we haven't really featured a lot of those, but I think I kind of want to, and like include something that is clearly somebody who's working with less resources, or, maybe hasn't had that much experience. Like, I think it's interesting to showcase that work too, So I don't want it to all be the glossy, more experienced stuff. I want to show a nice, collection of work, But I guess it's about time that we get to our talk with Jay Cheel. Today we're joined by Jay Cheel, the director, editor, and writer of the show Curse Films on Shudder. Welcome, Jay.
Thanks for having me.
So, first question in our rapid fire questions. How many days did you guys shoot Curse Films?
I think it was about 34 days, maybe.
How many episodes?
When we first started, it was supposed to be 3 episodes with 2 films per episode. And after our first filming block, things were going well. So we expanded it to 5 episodes and decided to just give 1 film an entire episode. So yeah, that was for 5 half-hour episodes.
I don't know if this question is germane, but can you talk about the budget? What was the budget of the whole show?
I don't know if I can talk about the budget. To be honest, I don't. I think I know what the budget. Let's say it was a reasonably.
Shoot.
No, it was. We did a lot with what we had, and we decided. This is the kind of show that I think you could do it in a way where it's like, let's rent a warehouse and we'll just bring our subjects in like an assembly line and interview them with some abstract warehouse backgrounds. But we decided we didn't want to do that. So we did a lot of traveling, visited people in their homes, and luckily Shudder was able to support that. So that's what I'll say.
As having worked on a few documentaries, I can just put the numbers together in my head of what that means, budget wise. How long did you work on the show from inception to it being released?
It was about a year. Yeah, like that's from pitching it. So Shudder actually approached me, and then I pitched my take on it, and that was in, I think, May 2017, maybe. Time is no longer means anything to anyone anymore, I think. So from that point to the show being finished, it was about a year. And then we waited for the appropriate time to get it up on the service.
How big was the crew?
Small. It was, we would travel with 3 people, myself, Brian Robertson, my producer, and our cinematographer. We actually went through 3 cinematographers because of the length of the shoot. And then we would meet with sound people in our locations. So I for documentaries, I like to try to keep a very small crew and keep it as intimate and casual as possible, especially when we're coming into people's homes and taking over. So it was a 4-person crew.
Side question. So when you're working with that small amount of crew, is it like you and your DP lighting together, or does your DP just kind of handle the lighting, or is it kind of like all hands on deck to like just do everything as a team?
They'll handle the lighting. I'll give some direction in terms of where we're going to shoot and what I'd like to see. And then as they're lighting it, I'm usually spending time with the subject and chatting and just warming them up a little bit to get to the point where we're ready to shoot, which I think helps as well, just to keep it more conversational and casual. Unless it's someone like, we interviewed Richard Donner and there wasn't a ton of chit chat before that. There was some, and which was amazing, but usually it's the DP working that all out while I'm kind of hanging out with the subject. Very easy.
All right, now my real question. Out of all your projects, how difficult was this one?
I've made 2 documentary features previously, which I did shoot myself, and that crew was essentially me and occasionally a friend of mine who's not a film person. So that was a lot of difficult filming. So compared to that, I would say it maybe it doesn't sound that interesting, but it was pretty easy because I'm a horror fan. I'm a documentary fan. I love filmmaking. So getting to essentially hang out with and chat with people who worked on some of my favorite films and talk to critics and academics about things that I'm interested in and movies that we share a passion for, it's a pretty easy gig. I think that the tough part is in the edit, when you have all the footage and you're putting it together and trying to make a narrative out of that material. That's the challenge, but I like that challenge.
Let's talk a little bit about the inception. We're filmmakers, and our podcast is mainly for filmmakers and film enthusiasts, and getting a gig to work with someone like Shudder and having them approach you is ideal. So can you talk a little bit about, was it the prestige you garnered from your 2 documentaries, or how did they approach you, and how did you essentially negotiate the opportunity for yourself?
So a few years previous to this, a guy named Owen Shiflett reached out to me when I released my feature documentary, How to Build a Time Machine. And at the time, Owen was working for AMC, and he was interested in the film, and we started chatting and became friends, and eventually he ended up at Shudder. And when he was at Shudder, this idea was presented to them. I believe Robin Jones, who was at Shudder, isn't any longer, but it was her concept, and she pitched this idea of a show about cursed films. And Owen thought of me partly because of my documentary work, obviously, but I had also just done a short film called Twisted, short documentary about local drive-in theater close to me that was hit by a tornado when Twister was playing. And it's this big urban legend around here. And I looked at where the truth lies in that story, because I had always heard about it. And it's the kind of thing, someone who was there and saw it happen. So looking into that story and, just the urban legend side of it and the idea of memory and investigating that on a deeper level, I think Owen saw that was a good fit for Cursed Films. He asked me if I'd be interested, and I basically pitched back to them what my take would be on the series. And the way we kind of summed that up and would always refer to it as just the idea of exploring the tension between the rational and irrational, and trying to figure out why we're so fascinated by these cursed legends.
So there was no representation in the middle. It really was a direct relationship between you and AMC.
Yep.
That's really interesting.
It's pretty amazing, because I was looking at your IMDb before the interview, and it's like, that Twister documentary is like the perfect portfolio piece to get the Cursed Films job. It's like, that makes total sense, and so it's really interesting how things like that just happen, and you were just the right person for the job, and you happen to have that connection to them, and it just all worked out. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's great when that happens, and it seems to be a thing with a lot of my work. There's these themes that rise to the surface, and not by any sort of conscious sort of decision making am I exploring these similar ideas, but it just seems to happen. And I guess part of it is just what I'm maybe naturally attracted to or curious about. And I definitely have an interest in obsessives, people who are obsessed about certain things or passionate about certain things. And of course, the connection, as you said, between Twisted and Cursed Films is a very obvious one. And even when I was presented with the chance to pitch on it, I felt pretty good going into the pitch, because I had that piece to kind of give an idea of how I would handle the Cursed Films episodes.
Having worked in, the feature documentary world, where you said it was essentially your project, you had a friend come on, and I assume something maybe somewhat similar with your short. What was it like to get studio notes and have to kind of share that vision on a weekly basis with this team?
I mean, it's always an interesting challenge, especially when you're editing your own work. People always say you shouldn't edit your own stuff, and I think that's a valid perspective, but there are some benefits. And when I'm shooting, I've worked as an editor on other projects where I've just been an editor and worked with other directors, and that's always been a very valuable experience in terms of my own storytelling and filmmaking. So even in those cases, I would get to see how that director, a Canadian filmmaker named Kevin McMahon, would handle notes. And that was always a great experience watching that process, because, on my two features, there were notes, but they were minimal, and I had a lot of control over it. But I have done some other work as well for Vice and some other kind of more jobs, that I would have to negotiate, or the sort of noting process. But this is definitely a project that was a lot more of even though it was a job, it became a passion project as well. And it's something that I'm very proud of. And the noting process, I like it. It can be stressful, and it can be tough to compromise certain ideas or certain elements of your vision to make sure that everyone's happy. And I'm always aware of what who we're making this for, what kind of service it is, ultimately what's right for the project and the intent of the project. And I just always look for those notes that are revealing cracks in my own ideas or perspectives, and force me to confront those ideas and articulate why I think it works for the episode or doesn't. So being challenged by really good notes, I think is a great thing, especially when it ends up turning into a better idea than you had, and it works for the show. But of course, there's always those notes that you don't necessarily agree with, and deciding which battles to fight and which ones to, just kind of let go of in order to retain something else that might be more important for you, I think is an important skill. And just not being overly precious about things unless you really feel that it's important and you can articulate why it's important. If it is that important, then you should be able to make the case why it should be kept. Otherwise, just talking through it, I think it reveals very quickly which elements might need to be cut, if that makes sense. And the other thing I'll say, being a director and editor, in the noting process, the one bad thing is it reduces two potential voices arguing for something down to one. So, you could have a partner there fighting for something and you're really just the one person. And it always comes back to, well, you're too close to the material. And
right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm editing my own feature right now, and some of my producers, investors give me that note on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You're too close, but I'm like,
but
I'm right.
Yeah, it's true, but I mean, I'd like to think I can pull myself back a little bit and be a little objective. And I mean, the best thing, I'm sure you'll agree, is taking that cut and sitting some people down, some friends or whoever, and watching it. And if there's anything you're unsure about, when you're watching it with other people, you will feel that, like when it's not working, you can sense it in the room. They don't even have to say anything. You just sense it. And it's like, okay, I feel like that didn't work. So being open to those changes, I think, is important.
So let's get back to the process a little bit. So like you pitched for the show, you win the show. Then what happens? Like, do you get to pick the movies that you focus on? Like, did they have a structure that you had to work within, or were you kind of allowed to just sort of do your own thing with this concept once you were brought on?
The selection of the films was kind of a collaborative thing. They had a list of movies that they wanted. They had a long list, and then we started eliminating. And I had a couple of suggestions that weren't on their list. And ultimately, I think we all agreed on pretty much all of them. I suggested one. I think I suggested Twilight Zone, the movie.
Oh, that's the best one.
Yeah, and they
Sorry.
and they agreed. So, but like I said, the initial shoot was for 3 episodes with 2 films per episode. So there was an additional film that ended up being cut from the final.
Is it season 2? Or can you say what it is?
Potentially season 2. I'm not allowed to say, but I can say that it's potentially season 2. Yeah. So yeah, that's ultimately, I think the first season, it feels very much like almost a greatest hits of what people usually, the films they usually talk about when discussing this subject, and also having enough of a variety where we could start at a place where it might be a little more playful, but then there's a bit of an arc, so that by the time we get to the end of the series and we're at Twilight Zone, the movie, the series has kind of shifted its perspective a little bit. So that was something we wanted to be aware of as well, and making sure that we're not doing 2 films back to back that might feel very similar. I wanted each episode to feel like a different, essentially short documentary on each film. Speaking
of the Twilight Zone episode, you used the footage or somehow you tracked on the footage of the amazing, Arik, I'm sure you've heard the story of the helicopter incident and the 2 children in it's the Vietnam segment, right? It's set in Vietnam?
Yeah.
We don't need to go into it, but I'm curious, I had never seen that footage before. It was a shock to see it. Was that a legal battle that you had to win, or was it actually relatively easy to archive, achieve that archival win?
It's easy to find. The real discussion was whether to include it and what to include. I mean, the scene was filmed with, I think, 5 cameras, so there's multiple angles, and The one we used is the furthest away from what happened. There are angles that are like medium shots to medium close-ups of them, and it's horrendous. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't a decision that was made lightly, and ultimately felt like it was. There's also this idea surrounding this footage that it has this sort of mystique surrounding it, like the footage that nobody's ever seen, and how did you find it, and where did it come from, and as though like we've delivered some exclusive, reveal, but the footage was widely available and broadcast on the nightly news when this trial was taking place. So they showed the accident in full. I mean, there's a part in the sort of news montage in that episode where you see the accident playing out again on the news, and I cut away before the impact, but they showed the impact on that news broadcast. So it wasn't something that was kind of buried. It was part of the trial, and for that reason is accessible. It's just a matter of, the ramifications of using that footage in terms of, introducing that into this episode, and why you would choose to do that. And I think with every episode, my kind of the way I approached it was to allow the subjects to dictate the tone. So the Omen episode is a lot more playful, and part of that is because all of the subjects are very playful. Like Richard Donner and Mace Neufeld both talk about everything that happened on the Omen in a playful way, and so that makes me think, okay, well then we'll let this exist in that sort of form. Richard Sawyer, who worked on Twilight Zone the movie and was there when the accident happened, is devastated obviously by what took place. And
is that the production designer who was talking about how his life was about to culminate with the film? Oh my god.
Yeah. So I just kind of used his interview to dictate a lot of the choices that we made for that episode. And it felt like his story was, when he tells it, he's very much in the moment. He's visualizing it. He's there. He's back when he's talking about it and seeing it happen in front of him. And it just felt like it was something that we should use to accompany what he went through. And also by the end of the series, to get to a point where we suggest that, Phil Nobile talks about this idea of curses kind of disappearing because of self-documentation, and everything is filmed nowadays, and it doesn't leave much room for this idea of a curse. And I think that's kind of true, because all of these stories that we talked about leading up to the Twilight Zone movie, I feel like if there was footage of all of those things, then people might not be sharing those stories in the way that they do. It would feel a lot more real. And having that footage, and that footage having been broadcast over the news and becoming a little bit of a story, I think robs that event of that supernatural power, because it just exposes it for what it was, which was a massive failure in protecting those kids and Vic Morrow. And when you see the multiple angles, it makes even less sense. Like talking about movies being hard to make, they're very hard to make. And this shows that, it's very easy to just get caught up in, whether it's the filmmaker's ego, wanting to have things bigger and better and more real, or having a last night of filming and wanting to get as much in the can as you possibly can at the lowest cost. And in that scenario, they were shooting with 5 cameras, this giant stunt that they wanted to capture all at once from multiple angles. And when you look at the angles, the one in the show is so far away that they're so tiny, you can't tell that that's Vic Morrow. It could have been a stunt double, and the kids could have been dolls. And the angle that's close is so close that you can't see the helicopter. So They could have done it without the helicopter. So it really was just a matter of trying to get it all in one and putting these people in this dangerous position that they in no way had to be put in. And they were just, it is essentially the hubris of the filmmaker thinking that, bigger and better. And John Landis talking about when they did the test explosions, you ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, that was the attitude, and they paid the price for that. So ultimately, when you get to the end of the show, I mean, as kind of maybe cheesy as it sounds, it turns the away from the supernatural, and you end up leaving with this idea that the people who worked on that film, the curse that they have to live with is having that memory and being involved with that production. So yeah, it was a very intentional arc throughout those 5 episodes.
You have to forgive me. I never watch the films, the people that we talk to, and I've seen all episodes of Cursed
good.
films. Good. So like, this is like my one time where I like actually have specific questions about episodes, and I'm like taking over. So I want to make sure that Ulrich, please jump in. Okay. So
well, I haven't seen the show because I don't have Shudder. So
well, the good thing is it's coming out on Blu-ray August 18th and digitally. So it will be available to people who don't subscribe to Shudder. And the good thing about that is, you know, I'm a big horror fan, as you know, you can see, and a big genre fan. But documentaries are a very important part of my, not only my life, but my formative cinematic experience. And I work in documentaries, so it wasn't just about making a show that lists out all of these crazy things that happen on the sets of horror films. It was about trying to make a series that works as a proper documentary, where we're attempting to use that concept of a cursed film as the opportunity to discuss other things about the human condition, and, you know, ideas of magical thinking and coincidences and pattern seeking, and why we are so fascinated by these stories, and why the ones we're fascinated seem to usually come from horror film sets. So what does that mean? What does it say about horror films in general, and how we interact with them and what they mean to us? So you know, the goal was to make a series that kind of elevates beyond, you know, the E! True Hollywood Story sort of spooky events on a film set. There is that there, but we attempt to get a little past that and dig a little deeper. That was also a great experience.
I'm also dying to know, you have, I think it's the last episode, where someone puts a curse on a movie. And I'm sure every single person has asked you this, but can you say what movie was cursed?
I wanted to put the movie in the episode. That was a note that I lost the battle on. The compromise was after the credits, you see him do the curse, and it's bleeped out which film it is. So I guess I can't say what the movie is, but I can say that the movie is currently postponed.
Oh. Is it Wonder Woman? Wait, hold on.
It is not Wonder Woman.
Okay.
I will say that.
That's my heart. And it could be a good number of films, which I won't press you on.
Yeah.
Top Gun 2.
Yeah, unfortunately, all these other films, he cursed one specific film, and all of these other films were the collateral damage of him cursing the one. So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, talking about the pandemic, how are you surviving it work-wise? Like, are you, I know it's different for documentary as well. It's like, I'll reckon are mainly fiction filmmakers, but are you working on a bunch of projects right now? Are you in post, or is there a moratorium for you as well?
So, I mean, luckily I had just started work on a doc series that I can't really say much about it, just because I'm not directing it. I was working as a writer and story producer, which is an interesting experience for me, because usually I'm directing. So it was great to kind of just have this other perspective and really focus in on giving notes about story, and using that experience to enrich my own understanding of telling a good story. So I've been working on that since last November up until this summer. I'm now kind of only on it like once a day, but I was lucky enough to be regularly employed with that gig and be able to do it from home once we moved to working from home. And now we're just starting pre-production on season 2 of Cursed Films. So we're doing 5 more episodes. And of course, with the pandemic, we will be facing all of the challenges that everyone will be facing with going into people's homes to interview them about these things. And some of the people we're talking to are older people that are higher risk people. So that will be something, even that we're now talking about backloading the production with interviews with people who are higher risk, and just hoping that by the time we get to the end of the production, it might make more sense. But we are shooting internationally this time as well. So we're actually going overseas first, while the States, hopefully clears up a little bit, and then we will reevaluate when we get back. And the goal is to go film as much as we can. I'm in Canada, so we're going to film up here a bit and then film overseas, come back. I'm going to cut the show again. So I'll be cutting while we're waiting for our, window to get into the States, when that makes sense, and then pick up from there.
Yeah. I mean, besides having to come in from a different country, I'm sure that's not the easiest thing to do, but with a 3-person crew, I mean, come on. that's way easier than like what anyone else has to deal with, like on a bigger set with like a crew of whatever, 20, 25, 100, whatever, like
yeah, we're lucky.
Is manageable.
The only thing that it might change is we might end up bringing a sound person with us so that we can keep track of the testing, COVID testing, because usually we would meet someone in our locations, and sometimes that does not work out. But
right.
rather than, just trusting that they will get their test done, and having a little control over that. And if anything, for the sake of the subjects that that are allowing us to come into their homes. And potentially one thing we might do is get PAs in the locations to handle things like, the wiping down of gear and whatever else. So those are all protocols that are being worked out by the producers, and we're obviously going to keep it as safe as possible.
So here's kind of an off the wall question. So like, you make a lot of documentaries. You're also a huge horror fan. Do you have any interest or excitement or ambitions to, do your own like narrative horror film one day?
Yeah, for sure. I don't ever want to stop making documentaries, but I would love to get a chance to make some scripted genre features. We are working, it's not a horror film, but we're currently raising the money for a feature doc about John Titor, who is a supposed time traveler who posted online in the year 2000 and told this great story about being from the year 2036 and going back to 1975 to get an IBM 5100 computer because it has this code language that they needed to rebuild the American infrastructure.
I remember this. I remember this story.
Yeah, so we're working right now on getting that financed, and we're coming along quite well. And that will be literally like a documentary with a science fiction film on top of it, with actors and everything, and will kind of be a true hybrid that for me is exciting because it will work as the merging of those two worlds, and hopefully suggest my ability to handle scripted filmmaking and genre filmmaking. And it will just also work as a great storytelling conceit for this particular subject. So yeah, that's something that I'm excited about, and eventually would like to just transition that into a full out scripted, whether it's horror film or thriller or whatever. If you think thriller is a genre, whatever.
We should talk about that. Is thriller a genre?
That should be a whole show. I'm a little taken aback because the way you said that the fiction side of the hybrid documentary will show your capability in fiction, and I understand that Canadian features are financed in a different system than U.S. American films are, but why not just fundraise for the fiction film that you want to make? What is it, part of that system of trying to have a sample in order to get money, or is it because you want a stepping stone yourself?
I mean, it's not necessarily a strategic, it's accidentally strategic. I feel like this story is better told as a documentary, just because it's so, for people who don't know, the John Titor story, it feels like a greatest hits of a lot of different time travel. Like there's a little Terminator, a little Back to the Future, a little Time Cop, and that on its face is not that interesting, because if you just made a scripted feature based off of that, you're really just making another time travel movie that, you know, you might be able to say based on or inspired by a true story at the beginning or something. I think it's much more interesting to look at how there are people that were pulled into that story and engaged with it in a very real way, to the point of them actually sort of course correcting elements of their lives to prepare for the things that John Teeter warned about, and what that means. Like, you know, why someone would put so much faith in a faceless voice on the other end of an internet message board. And the more, it's funny because, you know, I've been trying to get this film made for a while, and it's always the challenge, as I'm sure you guys know, with pitching is, you know, that question that always comes up: why tell this story now? And it's you know, the stock question, but it's it's making more and more sense why we should be telling that story now. Because first off, on the surface, John Teeter's predictions, or his version of the future, seems to be kind of weirdly aligning a little bit. You know, he talked about a potential second American Civil War as the result of a controversial presidential election. So you can imagine why some followers might be like, okay, it's coming. And while we didn't have a surprise nuclear strike by the Russians in 2015, the great thing about time travel is you can always say, well, John was here and he affected our timeline and simply delayed it, or, you know, like, so I think it's a very relevant story right now in terms of generally the ideas of fake news and putting your faith and trust into people who might not have your best interests, you know, in mind. So there are some interesting elements that are coming to the surface that are making the project that much more exciting. And the narrative, like science fiction thing on top of it, is kind of, it's also not strategic in that, you know, I just want to make this to show that I can do it. And I don't refer to them as recreations either, because it's also not just, you know, wanting to have some visuals to go along with talking heads to break things up. It's the realization of this fantasy of being caught up in this conspiracy theory and imagining yourself in the middle of a story that you might be the most important character in. And, you know, who would you have play yourself if that was turned into a Hollywood movie? You know, this is a very common sort of conspiratorial mindset, that I have access to this information that could change everything, and now I need to bring it to the world and warn everybody that this is coming. And that's, you know, very much, it feels very fantastic, and it feels like it could be informed quite a bit by the movies that those people have watched and their own imaginations, you know?
What happened with the John Teeter character? Was it like no one ever could track him down? It was just a voice on the internet, or like, was he actually a real person that people met? Like, what's the background?
There are theories. I mean, part of the reason why it's lasted is because people haven't been able to officially point a finger at any one person as being the author of this hoax, if you think it's a hoax. But there are some people that are considered by skeptics to be potential authors of the John Teeter story, and we'll be interviewing some of those people as well. So, and the film isn't really going to be any sort of investigative, you know, it's not like we're aiming to get behind the story and figure out who created this. If that comes out, that's fine. You know, I am more than happy to document someone else's journey to try to figure that out. It's more just about how people have been interfacing with this early version of an internet viral phenomenon. And it kind of reveals how, I guess, more savvy we might be, or you would think we are at this point, with having the internet around for this long, and, you know, being able to recognize fake videos or fake stories. But then again, you know, now deep fakes are coming out, and
right,
and again, this idea of fake news, and it's a really blurry line. So there's going to be some interesting themes running through, subtextual themes running through what on its surface will feel like a quirky hybrid science fiction documentary.
Yeah. Totally.
Well, I think we've come to our final 5 questions. And these are more of like a long view of you and your career. So the first question is, what's the first film you've ever made and how do you feel about it now?
Okay, I'm not going to go back to my high 8 days of like GI Joes outside in the backyard, but my first feature was a documentary called Beauty Day, which I made about someone local to me. Again, a guy who, his name's Ralph Zavadil. He did a show on cable access called Captain Video, and it's kind of like a Canadian version of Jackass, but it came out 5 years before Jackass. So the initial intent was just to show that there's this proto Jackass in Canada, but his story just was richer and richer. And as a character and a person, I got to know him quite well, and I still am quite close with him. And that experience was amazing. I mean, it was just, I used to watch a show when I was a kid, and we would trade VHS tapes of, Captain Video clips. So to then come around and, be making this documentary about him was kind of surreal. And yeah, it was my first real experience with making a film about someone else and having them trust that I would do that justice.
What's the best filmmaking advice you've ever received?
I don't know. I don't think there's any like line of some magical line that was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it was just more spending time. I think working as an editor has been very valuable, and not just cutting my own stuff, but cutting other people's work, and seeing why they're making the choices they're making and how they're fighting for their creative choices, and being an advocate for them, and also offering your own perspective and opinions and seeing how they manage that. I think that's been extremely valuable in terms of just thinking about storytelling. It's kind of not exactly an answer maybe you're looking for, but just spending time I think everyone should edit, because it's especially editing documentaries is a whole different challenge, because you're finding quite often the narrative in the cutting room. So it's very valuable.
Do you have a goal as a filmmaker, like whether it's numeric or emotional or psychological?
I guess just the wanting to make a scripted genre film and have something under my belt that's like, okay, this is something I'm hopefully good at and passionate about, along with my documentaries. But I mean, in terms of goals, it feels like, and I'm sure a lot of people feel this as well, every time you set a goal and you achieve it, it's never enough, and your goals always keep moving forward and are continually out of reach. So whatever goal I might have, it will always be out of reach, and I will never be satisfied if I meet it.
If you could go back in time, what's one piece of advice you would give yourself?
Another thing that probably a lot of people think is just trying to get started a little bit earlier. And, the tough thing of transitioning from wanting to be a filmmaker and thinking about it as some unachievable, fantasy in a way. But then once you actually start doing the work, I think some of that is the reality sets in that, okay, it's not unachievable. There are certainly levels to it, but now that I'm working regularly, directing, and I know a lot of people who work in the film industry, it's just a very real, achievable thing. It's certainly not easy. There's a lot of luck and like the Twisted thing, the idea of having done that leading to Cursed, it feels like you need there's a lot of synchronicity and luck, but I was always kind of keeping myself busy with making my own stuff. So that was never a thing. I think it was just the idea of transitioning from that being a pipe dream to actively pursuing it to try to get going a little bit earlier.
Finally, is making movies hard?
It is definitely hard. Some are harder than others. As I said, Cursed Films was kind of an easy gig because it just sort of perfectly aligned with my sensibilities. But I have worked on things that have been not only difficult creatively and, in the noting process, but also difficult in terms of, like shooting 9 days and then hearing that the hard drive got a virus and all of the 9 days of footage is gone. That's a whole other, level of difficulty. Talk about cursed films. I mean, that should have gotten the gig. So yeah, it's definitely hard, but I think it's a good type of difficult. It's challenging, but it's always presenting different challenges that you have to overcome. And because you're working constantly on new projects with new people, it's always exciting. So I'm more than happy to face the difficulty of filmmaking. It's certainly not as hard as probably 95% of the jobs out there that people are doing that I just could not handle.
Yeah, it's not like chainsaw repairman or something. Like
chainsaw repairman, brain surgeon, of course,
sure.
Architect, whatever. But yeah, I love it. It's the best.
I love that chainsaw repairman and surgeon are right next to each other.
Yeah, those are.
That's great.
It's very similar.
All right, Jay. So where should people go to find out more about you, to watch cursed films? Where should people head?
Well, for cursed films, you can head to Shudder and subscribe there. As I mentioned, it's going to be coming out on Blu-ray and digitally on August 18th. So I guess head to Walmart and wear a mask and don't get punched in the face by someone not wearing a mask. And for me personally, you can find me, I'm on Instagram at Jay.Cheel, where, I've posted pictures from behind the scenes photos from the various shoots. And I do a podcast called filmjunk.com, which is, we're pretty certain the longest running film podcast on the internet. We started January 2005 and have been going ever since. Yeah, I do it with a couple friends of mine and we have a lot of fun with it. So if you want to hear this monotone, dull voice for hours on end, head over there.
Amazing. Wow, Jay, thanks so much, man.
All right, thank you for listening. Thanks to Jay Cheel and to Priscilla Rios from KWPR for making this interview happen. Check out our website, makingmoviesishard.com. You can find links to the things we talked about on this episode. If you want to get in contact with us, send an email to podcast@makingmoviesishard.com. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at MMIH Podcast. I am Liz Minishow on Twitter and Liz Minishow Film on Instagram. Ulrich, where are you?
I am Ulrich B on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm all over Facebook, so you can find me there.
Please, if you like the show, tell a friend. That's really meaningful to us, to grow our audience and for more and more people to be a part of our community. Help us get the word out. Leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And finally, thanks to our producers, Greg Holtzman, Joshua Sterling Bragg, editor Colby Crow, the whole Bloodstream Media team for making this episode possible, and we'll talk to y'all next week. Blah, 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 blah. I want to make movies. Blah, 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 blah. So...